in real time. This is live television to put our beef behind us. Katt, I want to move on. Can we move on, man? Can we move on?
The handshake scene around the world. 2 men, 10 years of war, 1 stage, and 1 moment that stopped an entire room cold. When Katt Williams walked out from behind that curtain at the Netflix is a Joke festival, something shifted in the atmosphere. You could feel it through your screen. The audience felt it. The celebrities in the front row felt it. Kevin Hart definitely felt it. But here's what most people missed. And this is the part that keeps coming up in conversations between people who really understand this industry. While everyone else was on their feet screaming, clapping, losing their minds over that hug, one man stayed seated. Dave Chappelle. No standing ovation, no emotional reaction. Just a slow lean back in his chair, a narrowing of the eyes, and the quietest, most dangerous smirk you've ever seen on a man's face in your life. That smirk told you everything you needed to know, because Dave Chappelle doesn't miss. He never has. And when the man who walked away from $50 million on principle looks at a moment that the whole world is celebrating as beautiful and smirks instead of smiling, you need to stop and ask yourself, what does he know that we don't? Today we're going deep, deeper than the headlines, deeper than the clips. We're pulling apart that handshake, that hug, that moment, and revealing exactly what Dave Chappelle saw that nobody else wanted to say out loud. Stay with us, because nothing about this story is what it looks like on the surface. The night everything changed. To understand the weight of what happened that Sunday night in Los Angeles, you have to understand what kind of event this was. The Netflix is a Joke festival finale, the last night. The biggest stage Netflix comedy had ever constructed. Kevin Hart seated in the roast chair, the most powerful comedian in the entertainment industry right now, surrounded by a lineup that included Chelsea Handler, Jeff Ross, Dwayne Johnson, and Pete Davidson. This was supposed to be a celebration, a coronation really. Kevin Hart sitting on his throne while the biggest names in comedy took their shots, all in good fun, all within the rules of the game. The room was controlled. The energy was curated. Netflix had planned every second of it, or so they thought, because when Regina Hall stepped to the microphone and the tone of her voice shifted, just slightly, just enough, something changed in that room before anyone even heard the name. That 2-second silence. People who were there describe it as the longest pause in live television history. Not because it was literally long, but because the air pressure in the room changed, like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. And then the name dropped, and out from behind that curtain came Katt Williams. Now pause right here, because you need to fully appreciate what this moment meant. This wasn't just a comedian walking onto a stage. This was the equivalent of bringing a live grenade into a celebration and asking everyone to remain calm. This was the man who, just months earlier, had sat down on the Club Shay Shay podcast and spent over an hour systematically dismantling Kevin Hart's reputation, his character, his career, and his integrity, in front of millions of people. The man who once put up a $5 million cash challenge. The man who called Kevin Hart Hollywood's puppet, Hollywood's instrument, Hollywood's product. And now here he was, on Netflix's stage. Dwayne Johnson, a man who has stared down hurricanes and never flinched on camera, turned to the people beside him with a face that said, "Is this real life right now?" Pete Davidson nearly jumped out of his seat. Chelsea Handler's jaw dropped. And Kevin Hart? His smile froze. Not disappeared. Froze. Because Kevin Hart is a professional, and professionals don't let their mask completely fall. But if you watched closely, and millions of people went back and rewound that exact moment, you could see it. The split second where Kevin Hart's eyes registered something beyond surprise. Something closer to this is about to be very, very complicated. This moment wasn't an accident. Nothing about Katt Williams walking onto that stage was accidental. And that's exactly where this story begins to get interesting. 10 years of war. What was actually at stake? Before we can understand why that handshake meant what it meant, we need to go back. Because this rivalry wasn't just about 2 comedians trading insults. It never was. Think about what Katt Williams was actually saying every time he went at Kevin Hart. He wasn't just criticizing a colleague. He was making an argument about the entire structure of Hollywood. about who gets to succeed and why, about what the cost of that success actually is. In Katt's worldview, Hollywood operates like a chessboard, and the people who run it don't want real artists. They want instruments. They want people who are talented enough to draw a crowd, but controllable enough to never cause real problems. Katt's claim was simple and brutal. When he was at the peak of his power, he refused the deal. He said no to what he described as compromising demands from powerful executives. He held the line on what he believed a black man in entertainment should and should not do for the sake of fame. And according to Katt, because he refused, because he wouldn't bend, the system needed a replacement. Someone more agreeable, someone more manageable, someone who understood that access to the biggest rooms in Hollywood comes with conditions. That person, in Katt's telling, was Kevin Hart. Now, whether you believe that narrative or not, understand what it represented to millions of people who followed this feud. To a huge portion of Katt Williams' fan base, he wasn't just being petty or jealous. He was sounding an alarm. He was saying the game is rigged, here's how it works, and here's the proof walking around on two legs collecting checks. The dress controversy, the conspiracy theories about Hollywood rituals, the $5 million challenge. None of that was random. It was all part of Katt painting a picture, one where Kevin Hart was Exhibit A in a corruption case against the entire entertainment industrial complex. Kevin's response was equally sharp and cut in the opposite direction. Kevin never argued about the system. He attacked the man. He pointed to Katt's history of showing up late, fights on set, legal troubles, missed opportunities, and said, "Stop blaming the machine. Look in the mirror. You had everything and you burned it down yourself." Think about that for a second. Two men, both genuinely talented, both coming from nothing, and yet completely unable to agree on even the most basic question. Why does one man succeed and another doesn't? Is it the system, or is it discipline? Is it compromise, or is it adaptability? That question divided fans then, and it still does now. Where do you stand on that? Because it matters for understanding everything that came next. For 10 years, these two men existed in completely separate orbits. Kevin got richer, more powerful, more embedded in the Hollywood machine. He became the safe choice, the bankable name, the man every studio wanted attached to their project. And Katt? Katt became something else entirely. Mysterious, unpredictable, the kind of talent that makes executives nervous because you can never quite be sure what he'll say or do next. And yet, and this is crucial, he maintained one of the most intensely loyal fan bases in comedy, because people believed he was real. In a world full of polished, managed, media-trained performers, Katt Williams felt like someone who actually said what he thought. That loyalty was Katt's greatest asset, and it was also the thing Kevin Hart understood he needed to neutralize. Which brings us back to that stage, and to the question that Dave Chappelle answered with a smirk. The performance within the performance. When Katt Williams stepped to that microphone, the first thing out of his mouth told you everything about his state of mind. "I want an Emmy, but tonight might be the greatest acting performance of my career because I have to pretend you're a legend." Read that back slowly. That wasn't just a roast joke. That was a declaration disguised as a punchline. Katt Williams, in his very first sentence, told everyone in that room and everyone watching at home exactly what was happening. He was performing. He was not there in the spirit of genuine celebration or reconciliation. He was there doing a job. But here's the genius of it. And Katt is a genius, whatever else you say about him. By announcing he was acting, he created an escape hatch for himself. Everything nice I'm about to say is performance. The harsh stuff? That's the truth bleeding through the costume. It was one of the most psychologically sophisticated moves you'll ever see on a comedy stage. His eyes throughout the entire set told the real story. Cold, sharp, scanning the room like a man who knows he's surrounded and is calculating every exit. There was no warmth there, no relief, no sense of a man finally releasing a decade of grudges. There was the controlled, deliberate focus of a professional who knows exactly why he's in this room and what he needs to accomplish before he leaves it. He went after Kevin with surgical precision. The puppet jokes hit hardest, especially the moment when Katt's eyes drifted toward the VIP section, where Netflix executives were seated. That wasn't accidental. That was a message delivered live on their own platform, into their own cameras, to their own faces. I see you. And I'm saying this anyway. The reference to Diddy's parties landed like a depth charge. By the time of this roast, those allegations had become one of the biggest cultural conversations in the country. Katt didn't accuse Kevin directly. He was too smart for that. Instead, he targeted the silence. The way Kevin goes completely quiet when somebody brings it up, that's the real problem. Kevin Hart stopped laughing at that point, and the whole room felt it. Then Katt did something that became the most analyzed moment of the night. He stepped back from the microphone. He looked out at the audience, and he said, "People ask why I'm here. For money, maybe. Because this is the last festival left with even a little bit of soul, maybe." And he walked away to thunderous applause. But here's the question nobody was ready to sit with in that moment. Did he just tell us the real reason he came? The trap snaps. Shut. Kevin's public ambush. Now we get to the moment that Dave Chappelle understood immediately, and the rest of the world is still catching up on. When Katt started walking off that stage, Kevin Hart did something unexpected. He didn't fire back with a quick joke. He didn't let Katt have the last word from a distance. Instead, Kevin stood up, walked toward Katt, grabbed a microphone, and publicly, very publicly, asked for peace. Listen to how carefully constructed his words were. "We're brothers. I want to be your friend. Can we leave all this behind? Sincere? Maybe. But here's what Dave Chappelle saw in that moment that most people missed entirely. Kevin Hart had just engineered a psychological trap with no clean exit. Think about what Katt's options were in that exact moment. Standing in the middle of that stage, Netflix cameras, millions of viewers worldwide, the most watched comedy event of the year. Kevin Hart reaching out his hand with tears practically forming in his eyes. Option 1. Katt shakes the hand. He immediately becomes, in the public's eyes, the bigger man. But he also becomes something else. Manageable, cooperative, someone who can be brought into the fold, someone whose threat level just dropped significantly. Option 2. Katt refuses. And in that refusal, in front of millions of people, he becomes the bitter one, the hater, the man who couldn't let go even when the other side extended genuine peace. He becomes the villain in real time, live on camera, with no editing and no second take. Dave Chappelle reportedly described this as a move only someone with real power makes. By publicly offering peace, Kevin Hart didn't just take the high road. He built the high road and forced Katt onto it or off a cliff. Katt Williams understood this. You could see it in that pause, that 1 second that felt like a century. His eyes scanning Kevin's outstretched hand, the calculation behind the stillness. And then he took the hand. The hug that followed told the real story for anyone watching closely enough. No warmth, no back patting, no release of tension. Katt stood rigid, arms resting lightly against Kevin's back, like a man embracing something he doesn't fully trust. There was no smile of relief on Katt's face, just a distant expression that, as one observer described it, looked like a man quietly asking himself, "What exactly am I doing here?" Social media had the same question within seconds, and the answers people came up with revealed just how deeply this moment cut. 3 theories, 1 truth. In the weeks after that night, 3 dominant theories circulated in Hollywood circles and among comedy fans worldwide. And Dave Chappelle, in private conversations that later got out, touched on all 3. Theory 1. Netflix's absolute power. By 2026, Netflix wasn't just a streaming platform anymore. It had become the single most powerful gatekeeper in entertainment. More than studios. More than networks. In comedy specifically, Netflix essentially controlled who got heard on a global level and who remained a cult figure speaking to a limited audience. Katt Williams' truth, his message, his art, none of it could reach its maximum potential from outside Netflix's walls. A comedy special on their platform means distribution to over 200 countries. It means the kind of cultural impact that no podcast or independent tour can replicate. The theory goes that to secure that platform, reportedly worth tens of millions of dollars, Katt had to perform one ritual, a public reconciliation with Kevin Hart, the face of Netflix comedy. The hug wasn't personal, it was contractual. Theory 2. Cultural infiltration. This is the more complicated reading, and it's the one that Dave Chappelle seems to have found most credible based on his comments afterward. The idea is this: screaming about the machine from the outside only works for so long. At some point, the machine grows big enough to simply absorb the noise or silence the source. Katt may have realized that the only way to genuinely challenge a system is to step inside it. Appearing at the roast wasn't surrender, it was infiltration. Think about what Katt actually did on that stage. He stood on Netflix's platform, in front of Netflix's cameras, with Netflix paying for the production, and he used their infrastructure to publicly disrespect their most valuable comedy asset, reference their most embarrassing associations, and tell a global audience that the system was corrupt. He used the enemy's weapons against them. From this perspective, the handshake wasn't weakness. It was the price of admission to a battlefield, where Katt could do more damage than he ever could from the outside. Theory 3. The weight of a decade. This one is the most human of the three, and maybe, the most true. 10 years is a long time to carry hatred. 10 years of legal battles, public controversies, being the outsider, being the conspiracy guy, being the one people point to when they want an example of wasted talent. At some point, the weight of all that stops hurting your enemy and starts just hurting you. Maybe Katt Williams looked at that stage and saw an opportunity not just for strategy, but for rest. A chance to close a chapter that had been costing him energy for longer than most people maintain any grudge. But even this interpretation carries a shadow, because growth and compromise can look identical from the outside, and Katt Williams built his entire legacy on the promise that he would never compromise. So, which theory do you believe? Let us know in the comments, because this is genuinely one of the most divided conversations happening in comedy right now, and your perspective matters. Kevin's kill shot, the moment the mask came off. Now here's the part of the story that most recap videos gloss over, because this is where Kevin Hart revealed exactly who he was in this moment. And it wasn't the reconciliation-seeking brotherly man the cameras captured in that hug. The second Katt Williams disappeared backstage, Kevin Hart turned back to the audience, and the soft expression he had been wearing, the sincere, emotional, peace-seeking face, vanished. Instantly, like someone flipped a switch, and he grabbed the microphone and delivered what he later called his favorite moment of the entire night. "That was the best acting performance of my career. Don't believe that, man. F. Katt Williams." The audience froze, then erupted. But watch what Kevin did next. He went down a list. He mocked Katt's claim about reading thousands of books a year while somehow forgetting to read his own probation paperwork. He attacked Katt's attempt to position himself as the more serious, more talented alternative. "You couldn't star in Jumanji. Nobody needs a pimp in a family movie." And here's the masterstroke that Dave Chappelle recognized immediately. Because Kevin had already done the hug, already offered the peace, already positioned himself as the bigger man, the audience didn't experience his attacks as bitterness. They experienced them as comedy, as earned retaliation, as balance. Kevin Hart used that hug as both a shield and a weapon in the same motion. He protected himself from looking petty while simultaneously giving himself permission to be as brutal as he wanted. That's not emotional. That's engineering. Dave Chappelle reportedly said it plainly afterward. Kevin needed that hug to wash away the puppet label. Katt needed Netflix's spotlight to spread his message. Neither of them was operating from a place of forgiveness. They were both operating from a place of leverage. And then Dave said something that people in Hollywood circles are still repeating. In Hollywood, when two enemies hug each other on live television, that's usually when you should check who's picking whose pocket. Dave Chappelle's real message, the smirk that said everything. Here's why Dave Chappelle's reaction matters more than anyone else's in that room. Dave Chappelle is not a casual observer of Hollywood's games. He is the man who walked away from $50 million because the price of continuing felt too high. He is the man who went to Africa rather than continue doing what the industry wanted from him. He is arguably the only person in that room who has experienced, firsthand, the exact pressure that both Katt and Kevin were navigating on that stage. He knows what the machine feels like from the inside. He knows what it costs to say no. He knows what it costs to say yes. He has paid both prices in full. So when Dave Chappelle leaned back in his chair and let that smirk spread slowly across his face while everyone else stood and cheered, he wasn't being cynical for the sake of it. He was being accurate. His privately reported comments cut right to the center of it. People think Katt softened up. No, Katt just changed his position. He realized being a martyr in the shadows wasn't going to win this war. He needed Netflix's spotlight to spread his message. Dave wasn't condemning Katt for making the move. He understood it as a calculated evolution. The wolf didn't put on a collar out of weakness. The wolf walked into the building, because that's where the game was actually being played. But Dave also wasn't letting Kevin off the hook, because Dave Chappelle sees Kevin Hart clearly too. He sees the intelligence, the work ethic, the extraordinary business acumen, and he also sees the performance behind the performance. The way Kevin constructs his public image with the precision of an architect and the patience of a chess grandmaster. That hug was never for Katt. It was for the 100 million people watching. And that counterattack afterward was never comedy. It was the debt being collected. Dave Chappelle sitting in that audience and choosing not to stand, in a room full of people on their feet, was itself a statement. He was the only person in the building operating with full information. The only one not moved by the spectacle because he could see the machinery underneath it. What does it say about this industry that the most honest reaction in the room was a smirk from the one man who walked away from it all? What this moment actually means. Let's pull back and look at the bigger picture, because this moment, Katt and Kevin, the stage, the hug, the counterattack, the smirk, this is bigger than two comedians. This is a story about what authenticity actually costs in the modern entertainment landscape. Katt Williams built his entire identity on the promise that he would never compromise. That was the contract he had with his audience. You may not always get the most polished version of me. You may not always get the most commercially viable version of me, but you will always get the real version of me. That promise was worth something. It was worth a fan base so loyal they followed him through arrest records and canceled shows and years of industry exile. Because in a world saturated with managed, curated, algorithm-optimized public personas, real feels rare. Real feels like oxygen, but real has a ceiling, and Katt Williams had hit it. Meanwhile, Kevin Hart had built something entirely different. Not authenticity, or at least not authenticity as Katt defined it, but accessibility. He built a machine, a brand, an empire so large and so diversified that no single controversy could bring it down, because the foundation was never based on one man's unfiltered truth. It was based on product, and product scales. The question this moment forced everyone to sit with is this: does the man who refuses to compromise and holds the line on his values end up changing the culture? Or does the man who understands the system and works within it end up with more actual influence over what the culture becomes? Dave Chappelle has lived both answers. He walked away, and then he came back, on his own terms, on his own timeline, and arguably more powerful for the absence. But even Dave's return required a version of the negotiation we saw play out on that Netflix stage. There is no clean version of this story. There is no hero without compromise, and no villain without a point. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable truth Dave Chappelle's smirk was communicating all along. Not that Katt was wrong, not that Kevin was right. Everyone has to play by rules they didn't write. The final word. So let's bring it all the way back to that handshake. Two men, 10 years of war, one stage, millions of viewers, and one quiet man in the audience who understood that what the world was watching wasn't reconciliation. It was two professionals negotiating a business transaction in front of an audience that thought they were witnessing a spiritual moment. Katt Williams shook Kevin Hart's hand because the alternative, refusing on live television in front of the entire world, was a trap he was too smart to fall into. He shook it because Netflix's platform represented something his pride couldn't buy. He shook it because sometimes the most powerful move available to a man who has been fighting from outside the gates is to walk through them. And Kevin Hart extended that hand not because he had truly forgiven Katt Williams. The counterattack that came immediately after told you everything you need to know about that. But because offering peace publicly was the most effective weapon he had available. a weapon that neutralized Katt's threat while simultaneously elevating Kevin's image. Two men, both calculating, both performing, both serving their own interests while the world believed it was watching something spontaneous and genuine. And Dave Chappelle, seated, smirking, seeing everything, probably already knew how this chapter was going to end before either of them walked onto that stage. Because in Hollywood, the show never really stops. The cameras just move to different rooms. The real question, the one that stays with you after all the noise fades, is this. Is it possible to be fully authentic inside a system designed to commodify authenticity? Drop your answer in the comments, because this conversation is nowhere near over. And if you want to understand the deeper game being played behind the scenes of Hollywood comedy, the next video is going to take everything we just discussed and pull back the curtain even further. Make sure you're subscribed, because what's coming next connects dots that most people haven't even noticed yet.